and welcome. This is Sunrise, and I am Ayo Makinde.
When did the change of name take place? Hello. Hi.
Hello, Alera Edu. How are you?
Eh? Well, as you can see, she has introduced the two of us. I don't know which one is higher this morning. Is it a cocoa or cocoa?
It's your choice, really.
Or is it cocoa?
It's your choice. As your lordship pleases.
As your lordship
We heard
pleases.
a lot about that this week, didn't we? You know.
When I got on Twitter that day, I was like, all eyes on judiciary, don't they sleep?
That was so funny. And then I heard on another station when somebody mentioned, even journalists were asleep. I said, hey, dog does not eat dog. Well, the thing went on for what, 10 hours? You know.
Man, you know, one of the questions that I kept asking, I guess, was, look, how much of an education is this?
For anybody.
For everyone. Because some of the people are saying, please televise it. We want it televised on live TV. This is. Now it has been televised on live TV.
You are sleeping.
You know, it's
that was your contribution to the entire endeavor.
I kept asking Mr. Quakers, how much of an education is this for people? The thing is, and I think we had another conversation later, and I was like, look, some things are not just going to change simply because you don't know how it feels or how it sounds. I'm not even talking about the judgment or the outcome. I'm talking about the process.
Yeah.
The judicial process that many of us don't even understand.
So
when all of a sudden someone just comes and says, this is the judgment, and you are condemning the judgment, okay, fine. But all the English is, sorry.
All the Englishes.
All the things that were saying. I can't just hear, petitioner did this, petitioner didn't do this. At some point, I went on Twitter where the thing just started, and one guy was like, okay, I don't understand. But what's all this first petitioner, second petitioner? People didn't know this. People got lost. Who is this first petitioner? Who is this second petitioner?
That's all legalese.
That's all legalese, you know? But so, for me, I keep asking the question, how much of an education is it for people?
I don't think the whole point of televising was so that we would understand every word that was said. I think it was for us to see the process so that lawyers don't come out of the tribunal and then give us all kinds of interpretations of what they heard. Because we heard everything ourselves, even though we didn't understand some of it.
Yeah. I mean, even in secondary school, how much of your primary school work did you understand?
Well,
okay, what did the teacher say? They said we should see it this way. Okay, we just write it down in the question on the side. Well, that was some education, trust me.
Congratulations, Lagos. Congratulations, Nigeria. It came 40 years late, but it is here.
More than 40 years, actually, if you're talking about the Metro Line, or what do we call it now? Blue Rail, for now. And a good number of people are already, in fact, some of my contacts, and I'm pretty sure you've probably been getting the same kind of information from people in the UK saying London has finally come to Lagos.
Well, I wouldn't say that much.
Yet.
I wouldn't say that much.
No, maybe because,
but it certainly is a welcome development. Everybody who has been on it, who's been interviewed, had good things to say about it. Well, my producer was telling me this morning that somebody tweeted or something that Lagosians are always in a hurry and they were rushing into the train. Yeah, I just said, okay. Where else in the world do you go in the metro and you are taking your time and strolling in? The train is going to leave you behind. You have like 60, 90 seconds to come off and get on.
You know, well, let people know that. Because, you know, the perspective that with which people, a good number of people are looking at our attitude towards the rail system in Lagos for now is that of how we rushed into buses. And how that in 1983, the government of Buhari at the time came and said, war against indiscipline.
Bad.
And Fela did the general's job of saying, Oga, come on. Anyway, but to the point, you know, all over the world, metro lines are rushed. People rush in and rush out.
Yeah.
Well, if you say Lagos is bad, okay, try New York. The example that I gave,
in fact, in our younger days, we have been known to run down the stairs and run into the train.
Yeah.
Because the train is on a clock. It's going to take off whether you are at the door or you have one leg in. The train is taking off when it is taking off.
And it will first of all close the door, so you better...
You better remove your leg. You better make sure that you have run in by the time it's closing the doors.
The two things for me, Alero. Number one of it is, please, Lagos, let us own it. Let us own it. It doesn't belong to government. It belongs to the people. There is no government that comes into office with its own money.
And how many commissioners have you seen on that train? Is it not me and you using the train?
Exactly.
So it is in our interest to keep it clean and keep it working for as long as possible.
Please.
It is ours.
Government will only do what it can, and it has crashed travel time for so many people already. Yeah. And that's just one of, I think, is it 3 or 5 that the governor mentioned when we interviewed him?
Blue, red.
There's blue rain, there's blue, red, there's yellow. I think they're at least the 4 colors of Lagos. They are going to be there: yellow, red, blue, green. I'm almost certain that those four colors are going to be there. I'm not sure of which one yet. But I understand from the analysis Ayola was giving us this morning that the red line is probably going to be the busiest. Looking at the routes, it's likely
through Ikeja, through Yaba, through Ebutemeta to Marina.
So that's the number one thing. Please, let us own it. It doesn't belong to government. It belongs to the people. It belongs to the people. Let us own it. And anyone you see who is doing what they shouldn't do, on the vehicle, because it's a vehicle, please call the person to order. And it's okay to stand in the metro line. It's not Molwe.
In fact, the metro always carries more standing than sitting.
Yes, all over the world.
All over the world.
Even in Asia. I mean, just Google any Asian country in the US, on YouTube. You find they're always standing in that one. That's one thing. And then so all those things that you hold on to, they belong to you for your convenience. That's number one thing. Number two thing is, okay, I understand it's supposed to be maintained by Lamata, or at least some outsourcing by the Lagos state government. Maintenance is very, very important. And I am also hoping that, there is some kind of backward integration or technology transfer that will help us to be able to produce this thing here in Nigeria and not just have to
help us maintain it.
Exactly, and not just have to travel all over the world all the time simply because you want to buy some parts. But most importantly, congratulations, Lagos, and congratulations to the Lagos state government. And let's hope that this is something that is going to be circulated in different parts of the country. Interestingly, the president has begun to talk to former Governor Wiki. If I ask for land, don't give me. Just make sure your rail line works. And with that kind of matching order.
The governor of Lagos State, well done. I mean, you saw this one through.
Yeah.
Well done. I mean, you could see his excitement the day of the launch.
Who wouldn't be excited?
He was like a baby.
I think conversation around it started in 1981.
Yes.
It was, I think, the whole conversation, the whole thing about getting it done wasn't supposed to last beyond 1986.
Yes, Jakonde.
Yes, the Jakonde government at the time.
That's right. That's right.
So it's definitely exciting.
Check.
That's one down.
Lagos Metro.
Yeah.
Not completed, but we have started work on it.
Absolutely.
And that's encouraging. Now, what are we talking about today?
A lot of things, and one of it, it's very exciting that my producer wants us to talk about this, and it is very exciting for me as well. We're talking about from consuming to to producing nation. I keep referencing that book by Professor Oyelaro Yinka. He wrote this book, I think in 2016. They published it, beg your pardon, in 2016, and it's still out there. And that is the takeoff of our conversation this morning.
How much of what is contained in that book are we taking on board?
That will take us maybe another 50 years, but at least let's start. Metro Line took us more than 40 years. So.
Okay. And then after that, we'll be looking at the leadership that matters. Remember last week we were talking about the leadership that Nigeria needs at this point in time?
This one comes in the light of what the president said in India. So look, we don't lack anything but management and leadership.
And leadership.
So that's what this whole thing is about. Today, lifestyle. Let's understand teen pressure. What does that mean? This conversation, please, especially if you have teenage kids, you don't want to miss it. It's extremely eye-opening and very jarring, jaw-dropping.
And in closing, as is usual, we're going to have the Artist of the Week. And today we're going to have an unusual artist, because it is not one person.
Good. You know, that's why it's not artist. This one is not artist. It's, let me just give you a clue. It's artist. No, artist of the week. The artist of the week. It's not artist. It's an artist.
I'm talking about artist. I went to Toronto. And I was saying Toronto, and you were looking at me like, oh, okay, welcome. It's Toronto. Toronto.
Is it spelled without the T?
Artist.
Artist. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The artist of the week.
We live to learn.
So yeah, well, today we're going to be having the artist of the week. It's not even switched.
See you in just a moment. Get your cocoa or
cocoa.
Thank you for staying with us. Nigerians are being hit from all sides by factors that are making their lives more difficult, especially since the removal of fuel subsidy. These include the rising cost of living, which is reflected in double-digit inflation, stagnant wages, non-payment or late payment of salaries, and of course, high cost of fuel and transportation. Well, poor Nigerian, carrying all this weight and still soldiering on. Well, we're going to be looking at taking Nigeria from a consuming to a producing nation, and I'd like to welcome, joining us virtually, Stephen Onyewu, Professor of Economics and Business, Allegheny College in the United States. Good morning, Prof.
Yola, thanks for having me.
I'd also like to welcome Charles Iyore, Principal Partner, Dion and Associates Limited. He also joins us virtually. Good morning.
Hello. Good morning, Mr. Makinde.
Thanks for joining us. Now, we have talked about this for a long time. For years now, companies have been checking out of Nigeria and moving to other West African states. So, has it all been, let me start with Professor, has it all been talk? Have we not made any steps towards correcting this?
Let me just start by putting things in context. First of all, I want to correct a pervasive misconception about consumption. There is really nothing inherently wrong with consumption. In fact, both consumption and production are complementary and synergistic. You cannot have production without consumption. And consumption without production is analogous to a car that runs out of petrol at midnight in the middle of nowhere. So you've got to have both of them. So I just want to quickly correct that. Let me also say that the problem with Nigeria is not just consumption. It's just because we consume much of what we don't produce. Take the United States as an example. The United States consumes about 80% of its GDP. So it's high, just as high as Nigeria, but they produce much of what they consume. So let me also say that Nigeria has not always been a consumption-based economy. We need to put that in historical perspective. Back in the early 1980s, you see that consumption as a percentage of GDP was as low as 11%, specifically in 1981. But today, just before COVID, it was 80%. So there has been an eightfold increase in consumption. And not only that, the rate of consumption is alarming. It's increasing at such a rate that much of our GDP would be devoted to supporting our consumption. And that's why we are grappling with the problem of debt. And that's why we are not able to invest in infrastructure and all the things.
If you can hear me, Prof, perhaps the challenge is not whether or not we are consuming. Perhaps it's in the volume and the balance, just as you have talked about. The question then is, and when you say we've not always been a consuming nation, please help me understand. Because I have referenced a number of times on this program a lecture that Chief Obafemi Awolowo of blessed memory was quoted to have made before independence, that the political class of his own day in the 50s preferred imported stuff to locally produced ones back then. So when you say we haven't always been a consuming nation, there has been that, but how much of that balance did we have, and how much of it was in our consciousness before it got as bad as it has gotten?
Okay, let me just clarify. So go back to the 1970s. During the 1970s, we had giants, global giants like Lever Brothers. We had the Portland Cement. We had Dunlop and Michelin tire producing companies. We have hundreds of textile mills employing many Nigerians in that sector. We have a relatively vibrant agricultural sector producing. So that's what I mean by not being excessively a consumption economy compared to what we have today, where you have deindustrialization, where all these companies that I have just mentioned are no longer in Nigeria. And then what we do now is just consume without production. So we have lost that balance between production and consumption. And that's why I'm saying that we have not always been this obsessed with consumption. And I told you that in 1981, consumption as a percentage of GDP was 11%. But now, it's before in 2019, it was 80%. So that's the context in which I'm saying that. Now, let me also say something about Nigeria. You know, this idea of consumption came with a phrase. The genesis of consumption in Nigeria came with this destructive and very, very obnoxious phrase called the national cake. So after oil was found, I have no idea how that phrase crept into our lexicon, and everybody was talking about national cake. I have got to have my national cake. And there was this scramble to have a share of that national cake. And then, unfortunately, we saw a gradual reallocation of our resources from production to consumption. And then people began to abandon agriculture. Some entrepreneurs began to abandon production and they went into contracting and backwarding and forwarding. And we began to see all stripes of business people with no visible production. So in short, Nigeria has the capacity to produce. And we had demonstrated that in the 1960s and 1970s. But unfortunately, because of policy distortions and institutional failures, we saw ourselves moving away from what we had in the 1960s.
Clearly, what you and a number of other people are saying, Prof, is that we need to get back there because we seem to have derailed. Mr. Yore, I mean, this conversation, as you have heard, has been on for quite a while. There are those who would reference the fact that, so on the one hand, we had, our diversion, if I can, our interest, our priorities changed with the oil boom. What was the error at that time? Because there are a number of other countries in the world that have the same resource, but they haven't given so much of a priority to it as to abandon or ignore some other potentials that they have.
Thank you very much, Ayo and Alero. First, I'd like to thank Professor for clearly disaggregating the parts of production and consumption. I'll attempt to go a bit further, not in terms of a professorial perspective, but from that of the consumer on the high street. First of all, you need to agree, like he told you, that production and consumption are two parts of the same thing. If you are producing without consuming, the economy cannot grow. When asked China. If you are consuming without producing, the economy cannot grow. Come to Nigeria and find a case. So what you're trying to do basically, which is what is already told you, is that when you consume what you don't produce, it means the allocated resources from your single monocultural economy goes only to production. And those are the cases. And then you then come back and disaggregate it again and say, what really is consumption? Consumption is something you take because you think you need it and that you can afford to pay for it. So it's led by needs, whether it's physiological, whatever. And as much as possible, it should not be just about wants, which is what we talked about, spending and stupid display of wealth. Then you come to the area of production. And I'm happy that you also talked about what Banji Ilaram Yinka said in his paper. Again, production is not just production. Production is about planning your technology for development. In other words, you must produce what your people are going to take. Now, you cannot distort the consumption pattern too quickly because no matter what you bring, ravioli, pizza, and everything, if you put pounded yam to all of that stuff, the Binima and Nduma will still go for pounded yam. So culturally, there's no problem there. Now, in both parts, in the first part of consumption, there has to be a cultural realignment because right now, children would rather take Indomie and the rest of them than have Akara and Igi and the rest of them. So there's a shift that's going on there, which of course will determine the production process. And then when you want to talk about...
Just one second, my apologies for butting in. You talked about infrastructure. You've mentioned a number of things. But one of the questions that comes to my mind is, first of all, where did we derail? Not, and why? Because, okay, maybe I should put it this way. When you talk about infrastructure, I would say there are two at least. How much of hard infrastructure or soft infrastructure helped or harmed to bring us to where we got to today? And what do we need to do to begin to reverse?
Yes, thank you. So what Prof and I are trying to do is to determine the terms of reference and deliver the tools of analysis. So we are both talking the same point. Now, I just done consumption for you. I was now going into what's called production. Now, production is not a wish. It's a carefully planned thing. So, for example, you want to ask yourself, of those who are in the working population, you and me, or maybe I'm almost going to go into retirement right now, how many of them have the skills to produce? That's number one. Number two, for those you are skilling up, the young men who are going to school, how many of them are acquiring those skills to replace this working population? So in the absence of that flow, you have not planned your technology for production. Now, what I'm saying, and I want to say here, is that, like Prof has said, when all the business transactions, when all the business line items are about importing things and exporting things so you can make a margin, it destroys your local production base. And that's where you need to begin to correct the issues. The last time I spoke here, I said this thing called MSME is not just art and craft and cap and glasses. It is integrating those small units of production into what's called a production line. So, for example, if you're making a bed, the top might be produced by someone else, the bottom might be produced by someone else, the pin might be produced by someone else. On their own, the contracts will fail. But if the framework exists for that to happen, and the demand is at the end of the day, all of them make their own contribution. All of American production that you see is actually line production. Even the food that you see in the shopping malls come from cooperatives, 500,000 of them in America, when they decided that they didn't just want to feed America, they wanted to feed the world. So all those fruits and vegetables you see, actually not the ones that are canned, are actually coming from those cooperative farmers, and they don't get their money until the cycle is complete, exactly like McDonald's. So now the key issue here is, how did this start? It started because you have leaders who are not providing leadership. And I'm happy that the president said that in India. So what do you mean by providing leadership? A leader is somebody who you can trust, who you know will not run away if there's a crisis. If someone was beating you in primary school and you realize that your cousin will do something, once your cousin appears, the problem is dissolved. Now, so that leadership must be someone who is able to transform challenges into opportunities. Did you hear that? I can repeat it again. Transform challenges into opportunities. And that transformation of challenge into opportunities, which is called production, was happening in such a manner that the production is constantly ahead of inflation, which is always going to be there because the economy is growing. Now, if all of a sudden all your line items in the budget of the federal or the budget of the state or local government and in companies themselves is now about transaction, how quickly can it be done and turned around, and value creation disappears, then you're hiding to nothing. So the first thing to do is to begin to again define what is value, what is leadership, and what are we calling those who decide to think on our behalf and how they think on our behalf. Like I told you, production and consumption. Consumption is based on making cultural changes. Production is based on planning technology for development. We cannot all plan on our own. Those who do those planning on our behalf and inform our culture differently is called government. And the government has not done that consistently. We're surprised and we're expecting a different outcome. Thank you very much.
Well, Professor, you referenced some time in our history when we had certain companies, and you mentioned a few of them. You mentioned the Dunlops of this world and the Michelins of this world. And I mean, in the late 60s, we were producing pretty much almost everything, as far as I can remember, even though I was young at the time. But I remember that we had Nigerian-made ice cream, we had Nigerian-made biscuits, there was Nigerian-made textile, which was what we wore, even though we disparaged it by calling it monkilabia. So at what point, Prof, did we drop the ball? We had started producing and we were on the road. At that time, what was the value of the naira to the dollar? In fact, the naira had more, was it? No, it was still the pound. It was the pound. It had more value than the dollar. Where did we drop the ball?
Even the naira at the initial stage had a lot more value.
Very important question. So in the 1960s, we adopted what economists call the Lewisian dual economy model of economic development. You see, production occurs in two sectors, agriculture and industry. So the Lewisian dual economic model is based on the notion that you've got to modernize your agricultural sector. By modernizing the agricultural sector, you'll be able to raise the productivity of the workers in that sector. And as you raise their productivity, you release the surplus labor in the rural sector, and that surplus labor will therefore migrate to the industrial sector to support your industrial development. But you also have to focus on industrial development because you have to pursue both sectors simultaneously so that the surplus labor that is being released will be absorbed by a growing industrial sector. And this model has been used successfully in other countries. In fact, that's the model that China used. China has been able to accomplish spectacular transformation, reducing poverty from over 90% in 1978 to about 1% today. How did he do that? Through the Lewisian model, because it transformed the rural economy and simultaneously promoted industrial development by training people on how to become industrial producers, by supporting industrial enterprises, by giving incentives to foreign investors to come to China to produce. And over time, income per capita increased. We started that in Nigeria in the 1960s up to the 1970s, and that explains why we had all those industrial estates in Ikeja, Ilupeju, Agbara, Transamadi, in Port Harcourt. We had all those textile mills in Kano, Kaduna, and everything was going very, very well. And then we saw that model working, and people were coming from villages to Lagos, to Kano, and getting jobs and doing very well. And then comes the Dutch disease. The Dutch disease, or the resource cost. So we stumbled into the oil wealth, and we had the illusion that now we have arrived, and everybody was enjoying, and government was subsidizing commodities. I remember in those days, you go to some government-owned stores, and then you can buy rice and beverages, and at highly subsidized prices. And then this idea of national cake came in. So talking about derailing, that's where the whole thing started. It was all about the Dutch disease, that the discovery of oil changed relative prices, distorted the economy, sent the wrong signals, and people began to marginalize agriculture.
Okay, so Prof, we need to begin to find our way back home very, very expeditiously. So, Mr. Yore, let me ask you, and I'd like you to decrypt, practically speaking. You both have spoken to, the consuming, producing, and all those issues, and the issues where we are coming from. We all now have a fair idea. Please decrypt, Mr. Yore. Where do we go from here? What do states have to do? What does the federal government have to do? You also spoke about micro, small, and medium enterprises, which everyone believes, employs the most people in any population. So what do they have to do? What does the private sector have to do if we are going to find our way back from being a largely more consuming nation to a largely more producing and exporting nation? What do we have to do, particularly from the subnational levels, if you're going to get out of the rut?
Well, thank you, Ayo. I'm a consultant. I should be paid for this, but it's all right. I'll tell you what we have to do. I'll tell you what we have to do. I mean, Professor has clearly explained to you how labor mobility from agro-based into agro-allied and industry takes place. And that is driven by something called raising productivity. Raising productivity is called impetus. Impetus is driven by money. Now, if you don't manage your money well and your take-home pay doesn't get you home, it means there's no impetus to drive production. That's the first one. The second one you need to realize, which I think that made us very neonates, like some little children, is that when the South was able to organize itself to deal with the West in terms of having fair prices of oil through OPEC, they made sure that no such organized structure will ever take place again and began to call all such organized structures cartels. And the first thing we did in Nigeria was that before you wanted to access money from IMF and the World Bank, which really is a multilateral agency and not banks as it were, the first thing we were told to do was to destroy your commodity boards and the rest of them so that the linkage between the local village environment and the city environment were completely distorted. And those were quickly replaced by those imports. So really it's self-inflicted. Now, so if you want to change all of those things, which I've told you, you need to make sure that the impetus of increasing productivity is still effective. Right now, it is no longer effective. Because when you begin to draw money as a special drawing rights rather than backed by anything, it's more like a double-edged sword. In the hands of a young man, he can end up killing himself. So most African countries now can do special drawing rights, and they can determine how much money goes into circulation. That is the easy part. How you make sure the linkages that are in the economy that can sustain growth constantly ahead of production, ahead of inflation, is in place, is not a child's play. And very often when we decide to determine who does those things, rather than look for those who have the capacity for converting challenges into opportunities, we are still blinded by what they call unconscious bias, which is now a broad term for describing everything from racism, tribalism, everything. Because at the end of the day, you're not allowing the best people to do the job that they need to do. And that's likely because those who are guiding the process itself don't even know where they want to go to. So those are the challenges. So we need to see all that happen. Now, I'm not defending anybody, but I'm saying before now, all we've had that those who came into lead came by usurping powers, whether through the gun or the rest of it. But maybe now we have someone, no matter how he got in there, may not have done that. So we expect the need to begin to impress the populace by giving the Dodgy Award, by telling you want to do industrialization where you don't have the capacity locally, by telling you must now sell a naira to sell the currency. Those are things that should never have been in play at all. Now, that
history, Mr. Yore, so we have to just find our way back. We have to literally claw our way back. But there is a concept that I came across from Leke Older some time back. I suspect that you know him. And it's a concept that I think we have used before in the First Republic, and that is creating economic blocks all over the nation. The Southwest had such an industry, if you like, against cocoa and agricultural products. The North had its own. And some of these things are actually represented in some of our Naira notes back in the day. The groundnut pyramids in the north, the cocoa in the southwest, and a number of other things from the southeast and the rest of them like that. So do you see any potential, Mr. Ayore, in us going back to that kind of regional integration or regional cooperation among the states, now that we have, written or unwritten, 6 geopolitical zones in the country? Do you see a situation where we can actually scale up each of these regions into economic blocks? What will it take if we have to?
Well, just like I had said, I mean, I know Lake Elder, we had shared the ship platform together. What I'm telling you now, I didn't start saying today, I started saying in 1988. That the only way to get out of the system is to make sure there's specialization. America, as big as America is, if you go to New Orleans or Texas, you know it's oil. If you go to Florida, you know it's tourism. If you go to New York, you know it's financial services. If you go to Detroit, you know it's cars. So we've been saying that for a long time. I even think when Ilala Man was industry minister, I said, look, you can't achieve anything if you don't take small production into a level of commercialization so you can reduce the pricing. So what I'm saying is that what Lake Elder said, we've always said, and I've said, anything that is not like that, it means you're turning the country into a mass production of poverty, which is what we've done for like 32 years. That's the first one. So the second one I told you earlier on, which is what Prof said clearly, is that for you to move labor from production, different levels of production into the fifth or fourth economy, there has to be impetus, which means that what you earn must be able to drive you in the direction that you're going. That impetus is the currency. Now, if you don't manage your currency well, which we haven't done for a long while, it means that the sovereign, who's the president, has nothing to attract people and direct the economy. So these are things that need to be corrected. And because right now, he's accountable to the population, all of it, and not trying to put upside that he knows what he's doing. And like I've said, if we want to do that, we need to start from the brass tacks. I don't know what Banji wrote in his document, but I'm sure it will be in this line also, in chemical engineering also. And the key thing for you to realize that nothing happens like magic. For example, let's look at the economy, for example. There cannot be no production if the currency is not well managed. The currency cannot be well managed if you don't have what's called fiscal consolidation. In other words, how much are you spending? And is it gathered by what you're doing from taxation? You can't get that to happen if you don't understand that the money in circulation has an index to what is called taxation, where you set the rates appropriately and get the money in. We missed it in England for 2 weeks. We now have 8 months, eight quarters of recession. So those are the basics. But when you speak to people, they say, oh, don't go to rent cheap, they say all kinds of things, and they want to make you look as if they are over analytical. That's the thing we need to do. Let's get to the table. What we have as challenges now can be sorted in less than 90 days. I'm not being arrogant about that. Thank you.
Professor, I would like you to also weigh in on this question that my partner has asked, factoring in the fact that those who have ventured into production have tales of woe to tell. Some have actually told us in this very studio that they pay as many as 35 to 37 different types of taxes. I mean, if you pay those kinds of taxes, how can you remain in business?
Yes, that's very, very critical. When you talk about production and how to foster it, you talk about how do you get a critical mass of labor, capital, land, technology, and entrepreneurship. So that's key. But then on the other hand, you need to have good governance. You look at China, you look at South Korea, you look at Singapore, all the countries that have succeeded in building a productive economy. You will see that across board, they have one thing in common. They have good leaders, they have good governance, they have good policies. So good governance gives you good macroeconomic policies that incentivize people to produce, to become entrepreneurs. Now, the problem we have in Nigeria is that the return on investment in the production sector is very, very low. So you are more likely to make money by going into politics. So the return on investment in politics is very, very high. And so people who go into business, into production, they face all kinds of bottlenecks, ranging from poor infrastructure, lack of electricity supply, water supply. You talk about policy distortions, high interest rates, and high taxes. So you need a leader or a group of leaders who would set a vision and say, here is what we want. I haven't seen in Nigeria yet what our overarching goal is. Look at these other countries. They will tell you that in years so and so, we want to be this kind of economy. Take Rwanda as an example. They said back in, I think, 2010 or so, they said by 2020, they want to be a knowledge-based economy. And therefore, they put together a set of policies towards that. South Korea said explicitly it wanted to be an export-oriented country. And then it invested in technology, promoted collaboration between the enterprises and the universities, created science parks, subsidized research and development. You talked earlier on about Banji's book. He wrote a lot about technological capability, which is supported by the state. So you have to have a state that creates an enabling environment for production to thrive. You don't you don't need a state that punishes production. You don't need a state that disincentivizes production. And that unfortunately appears to be what we are seeing in Nigeria today.
My apologies for butting in. You began by saying the other time that there is a balance that we need to create between between consumption and production, and that's fairly said. But the challenge a good number of people have had is what Alero mentioned the other time when she said that the textile products of those days had a nickname. That wasn't very, very complimentary at the time. So it leads to the question of perception. Now, we just received a mail from Emmanuel Daudu in Ikeja who says, a nation that imports more than 80% of domestic consumables can never record meaningful economic development. Nigerians' propensity for foreign products must change in order to encourage domestic production. You lift productivity and not mouth it. We can say that for entertainment products, but how about for products like things people wear, things people consume, and all of those things? How do we engineer that mind shift so people actually see and prefer made in Nigeria stuff to the imported ones?
And Prof, this will be your last thought on this.
Going back to history, we in the 1960s we adopted what is known as the import substitution industrialization strategy, where we espoused to produce within the domestic economy all the things we used to import. And then we put tariffs and other protective measures to make sure that local producers of those items survived. And then what did we have? We began to see smugglers bringing goods into the economy and people circumventing that policy. And that brings me back to what I said earlier on, which is institutional failure, that when we put in place policies to promote domestic production and domestic consumption, those policies don't tend to work because of, I hate to use this phrase, Nigerian factor. So other countries that use the import substitution approach succeeded. South Korea succeeded with import substitution. They protected their industries and gradually exposed them to international competition. We had the same set of policies like South Korea, but in Nigeria, it did not work. So I think the way to go is to build up the capacity of our own enterprises to compete, to produce goods that can be embraced by Nigerians. So we need to build their technological capabilities. We need to support them by giving them access to capital, helping them to build, to have access to technology, and also making sure that they have access to infrastructure. Now, if you give them these opportunities, Nigerian enterprises will produce goods that will be embraced by Nigerians. One of the reasons why we prefer foreign-made goods is because of the fact that they are of higher quality than the ones we make in Nigeria. And why? The reason is that our enterprises do not have the resources and the facilities that foreign enterprises have. So as a result, they can't compete. As a result, their costs are too high. They can't meet the quality standards that other manufacturers or other producers in other countries have. So we need to begin to re-examine our policies and make sure that we strengthen the ability of our enterprises to compete. I think that's the solution. Just preaching to them to embrace Nigerian goods and reorienting people to be patriotic, that will not work. I always say that you cannot legislate production. You cannot force people to buy what they don't want to buy. So we don't have a choice other than to ask ourselves, how do we get our enterprises to be internationally competitive? China did that. Now China exports all over the world. The largest exporter in the world. How did they do that? By investing in technology, by training their people to acquire new skills, by imitating foreign technologies, and so they're able to succeed. So, and that's where we need to go back. We derailed. We completely derailed. If we stayed on track from where we were in the 1960s and early 70s, by now we would have been a leading exporter in the world. We would have been attracting GVCs, global value chains. You know, one of the things I ask myself is this. We have the labor. We have educated people in this country. We have people who are entrepreneurial. Yet we are not attracting global value chains like other countries, even other African countries. You know, global production now is in terms of value chains. Companies locate different parts of their processes in different countries. So we're not getting any piece of that. So we need to then begin to look at our institutions, our policies. And to do that, we need a leader with a vision.
Your final thoughts on this, please, in one sentence only. We've run completely out of time.
Government should come out and tell us what kind of economy it wants to build. What is their vision for this country?
Yes, sir. We need to go now, but we need to take Mr. Ayore's final thoughts on this matter. In one sentence, please, Mr. Ayore.
Could do that in one sentence. But rather than talking long theory, I'll use myself as an example. When I ran a foundry as a young engineer, the most modern brewery in Nigeria was the Ogba Brewery. And they had in-feed camps and out-feed camps in their bottling line. And when those things break down, we shut down the bottling line. I replaced those bottling lines with an aluminum-based in-feed camp and out-feed camps. And it was tested by the company in Bakure in Guinness. And from stopping after every 80 hours of production, they were able to go from 200 to 400 hours. Now, that was me as a young engineer a long time ago. And that was not by no means the best of class. There are very many more people who were more smarter, including Banji Oyeyinka. So what I'm telling you basically is that let's go back to the rigor of production. Find people who can turn challenges into opportunities.
Very much. Mr. Charles Ayore, Principal Partner, Dion and Associates Limited. And we also had Professor Stephen Onyewu, Professor of Economics and Business, Allegheny College, US, both of whom joined us virtually. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming to share your insights with us on this particular matter. Sunrise will return in just a moment with another interesting conversation. Do join us.
Thank you. Before you can be a billionaire, you need to first of all lead a good business. And so let's talk about leadership that matters. That's our next conversation this morning. You see, Nigeria is inundated with rich human and material resources begging to be harvested by purposeful, creative, and innovative leadership. Interestingly, okay, we'll get there. So leadership that is based on the cultural values of the people and takes a bottom-up approach holds the key to unlocking development quagmire. The development quagmire in Nigeria has found itself. But this is not the case due to leadership failure, corruption, bad governance, and an endless list. President Bola Tinubu in India said, and I quote, "We're not poor in knowledge, we're not poor in human resources, we're only poor in management and leadership. And that is why I ran for president, to help all of us mold the soul of our democracy, the soul of our country in the right direction." What's this about? So when the president is saying we are poor in management and leadership, exactly what do you think he is talking about? Two gentlemen join us this morning for this conversation. Professor Vincent Anibogwu is Director General, International Institute for National Transformation. He joins us alongside Olatunji Shobodu, who is Dr. Olatunji Shobodu, founder and CEO, Emet Leadership Academy. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Prof, let me begin with you, this conversation. What do you make of the president's comments when he says we don't have a problem of knowledge or human resources or even resources, because there is hardly a state in Nigeria that doesn't have solid minerals buried and arable land all over the place. So when he says we are only poor in management and leadership, what exactly do you think he is talking about?
Thank you, Mr. Good morning, Mr. Lero. I think the president is correct when he made that statement that the challenge Nigeria faces is not our resources. We have them. It is leadership first and foremost, and then management. Why? Because you can have all the world, but if you don't know how to process them, and by the way, processing them requires discipline. So you have to have a people that have the patience, first of all, to learn the skills of processing what they have, and then also the patience to that process so that they can produce the expected outcome. Unfortunately, our culture has a lot of good aspects. There are a lot of things in African cultures that I will never throw away, such as value for human life, value for communities. But there are aspects of our culture that does not teach us the patience we need to research, find out fundamental principles that are buried in life. Let me give you a simple example. We have lived with birds and chickens for years. But today, when people see chicken, they only eat as seafood or demon. You know, if a bird flies into that particular place where you are now, out of nowhere, the first thought is they have come again. And with the white man will look at it from principal perspective. Did the bird enter the, did they fly? They have the mechanisms by which the bird entered that place. Out of that, they will build an airplane and create a massive industry. So we need to reorientate and begin to learn and apply principles that are buried around us. And to do that, we have to cultivate the culture of research and development, asking questions about our environment. Right now, we're just looking for what to plug and eat, not what to dig and process. And until that mindset is cultivated, we will continue. Education is the key for reorientating our people in the right direction.
Let me ask Dr. Shobodu. My first question to you is a response or a quick reaction, initial reaction from one of our viewers right now. when we announced that we're going to be talking about leadership that matters, one of the first things he said was that we need to think about it in the light of the quality of leaders, or the tract through which leadership is selected in Nigeria. He said, and I quote, "Most politicians are not leaders or are leadership without a why." What do you think that he could have in mind for saying that? Do you agree with him, by the way?
Well, thank you again for inviting me this morning. Well, I would start by saying there are different kinds of leaders. And there are good leaders and there are bad leaders. And bad leaders are not limited to politicians, neither are they limited to private sector operators. You have good leaders and bad leaders everywhere. Of course, the process that produces a leader ought to ordinarily result in the selection of a good leader. But again, who is a good leader? Who is a bad leader? That's up to the populace or to the electorate or whatever the process, determinants are, to be the ones to judge. And that may very well be where there is even a problem. And I dare say that it is even possible that those who are selecting or electing a leader may not even know who a good leader is, who a good leader ought to be. So it is possible for a selection process to produce a bad leader, all right? Whereas the people thought that that person is a good leader, and vice versa is the case. So talking about the point that that person made, it needs to be made clear. The fact that somebody is a politician doesn't mean he or she is a bad leader. All right, politicians are not inherently bad leaders. Among politicians, there are good leaders. Don't forget as well that some of those who are in politics came from the private sector. We often tend to think that good leadership is limited to the private sector. It's far from the truth. So within different, categories of stakeholders in any nation, in any, economy, you have both good and bad leaders. The point is
the interesting angle to that is, that's actually coming from the angle of what the president said when he said the challenge Nigeria has is that of management and leadership, a deficit in management and leadership. Perhaps that's the reason this fellow made that comment. So in terms of looking at it from that perspective, not just at the federal level, but at the state level as well. And then also look at it from the perspective of the fact that there are different cadres of leadership, even in government. I often contend that there are elected leaders, there are appointed leaders, and then there are employed leaders. So when the president made that comment, is it something you think is holistic, or it's just segmented to any of these three?
Well, I love the fact that the president identified that point, and that is true. Like Prof said also, that is true. If we had good leaders at whatever level, we won't be where we are today. We often say everything rises and falls on leadership. If we had good leaders, if we've had a spate more good leaders than bad leaders across the various levels, we will not be where we are today. Good leadership is not exemplified by a rundown of a nation or a rundown of a system. Good leaders, are instruments of growth, are instruments of prosperity. Good leaders people who understand the place of resources and how to mobilize their people, to use those resources productively, effectively. They help to enhance the welfare of the people. So the totality of that statement is right. The totality of that statement is right. And I think it would be defeatist. That doesn't mean that everyone who has played a leadership role, whether they're appointed or elected or, has been a failure. But what it means is that as a nation, in totality, from a wholesome or aggregate point of view, we have failed on account of, poor leadership. And the statement that the president made is very instructive. It is instructive, one, because he identifies it, two, because he says, now I'm putting myself, that was why I ran for this job. And that is, embracing responsibility and indeed a willingness to put himself out there to be held accountable. And that's a good starting point. That's an indication, of someone who means business. And I know, that you normally try to, emphasize that, well, yes, it doesn't end at the level of the president. There are different levels of leadership. But it starts always with the overall head. As they say, the fish gets rotten from the head. It always starts from the overall head. And that's why we often focus, on the head when you are talking leadership. And that's why, coming from the president himself, this statement is very, very instructive. Of course, I believe the details of how to then take the bull by the horns, we'll discuss as we go on.
Professor, Dr. Shobodu talked about good leaders and bad leaders, and sometimes how political parties throw up leaders who are not necessarily good, but it is the electorate that does the selection. So in selecting our leaders or electing our leaders, whichever word you decide to use, what do we look out for as those who are responsible for actually putting them in position?
Thank you, Mr. Lero. Excellent question. I always say that every Nigerian has a right to run for an office. It is dependent on the INEC and authorities that are assigned to oversee the process to qualify or disqualify them. And then, of course, once they are qualified, Nigerians must have the tools for us and then electing them. Let me just give you a couple of things we should look out in selecting leaders. Number one, what is their moral compass? What is their moral compass? Why is that important? The moral value of your leader ultimately determines the environment of the nation. What they tolerate will be tolerated in the nation. What they judge will be judged by those under them. So it's extremely important that we know the moral inclination of those we are electing, because ultimately their value system will become the national value system. Number two, we must assess their emotional compass. How stable are they as individuals? How stable are they emotionally? What is their sense of fairness and equity? We may not, and we do not come from the same backgrounds. We do not, and we must have leaders that tolerate other people's group and respect them. That's what the Constitution says. So we must measure people's emotional compass. Number three, we must understand and assess their intellectual capacity. As I said, running a nation is a hard work. There are so many systems and processes that need to be juggled and twisted. The economy, transportation sector, the health sector, and what have you. So the person must have the mental capacity, at least to understand the solutions being provided by different sectors. Ultimately, they have to make the decision. The buck stops with the national leader. So they must have the intellectual ability to process what's being presented to them. Number four, their social compass, ability to be sensitive to the needs of the people. You must know when to play political games. You must know when to be a human being that the populace touch. They must have a sense that you care for them, that you're human, you have a heart. And that's the social aspect that also need to be assessed. And finally, the health, the vitality of the individual, the ability to be creative, innovative, go beyond the natural boundaries and look for solutions. So in summary, their moral compass is number one because it determines not just the political environment, but even the economic environment. Their emotional health, their intellect, their social intelligence, all of this will ultimately determine an effective leader. But like my presenter, Mr. Olatunji said, if you don't teach people how to look for these things, then they don't know what to look for. So our universities, our secondary schools, emphasis on civic education. We need to respond. You can inspect what you do not introduce in people. So I think it will require fundamental restructuring of our education system to make sure that people are properly equipped in order to make these assessments. That would be my initial take, Mr. Lero.
Let me come to you, Dr. Shobodu. Something you said the other time that, everything starts from the top because that's where everyone else gets their tone. I believe you in the space call it tone at the top or something like that. A number of other people call it body language. Now, the engine of governance is a very, very huge and complex one. And as we mentioned the other time, the leadership strata are quite varied. The leadership spheres are also diverse. While we're talking about Nigeria as a country, we also have states. Over the years, and it's one of the things that we had that was mentioned in the first conversation we had about taking Nigeria from a consuming nation to a producing nation. Someone talked about vision. There can be no leadership without vision. Over the years, we've been talking about the need for Nigeria to have a national ethos, towards which every sphere of government, every influence is channeled. At some point, Lagos State seemed to have that, and consequently, we are celebrating so many milestones in Lagos today. Unfortunately, Lagos is not the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So what is it? And that's the reason we were talking about the different strata of leadership, particularly at the subnational levels. And there are 36 of them at the very least. That the president only happens to be governor in the FCT as well, if we can put it that way. So in terms of setting a national ethos that everyone must line up with in the country for a long, sustained period, what needs to happen? In the federal government, for instance, it's a 4-year tenure of maximum 2 terms. How much of that tone setting and sustainability can be achieved within 8 years before another president comes that could decide, I'm going to do away with this one and start something fresh. So how do we set a sustainable national ethos or national vision that everybody must line up with?
All right, thank you. When you look at we often talk about the president's 8-point agenda. And when you put it side by side with the statement the president made about leadership, I think there is a missing point on that agenda. Probably that point should have been number 1. And that point is leadership development. Leadership development. If you understand, if you acknowledge that we have everything, all right, and what we lack is management and leadership, then why isn't leadership development on that agenda? And leadership development speaks directly to this critical issue, because every other thing that you have listed on the 8-point agenda is dependent on the quality of leadership. And it doesn't matter, and that applies to all levels. So let me start from there. Now, let's even talk about 4 years and not talk about 8 years. The 4-year term for one who is a good leader is enough to change the face of Nigeria, because the focus of a leader isn't so much on all those 8-point elements. It's on the development of leadership capacity and capability in the people. Leadership is first about people than any other thing. When you focus on the people, you develop people, all right, things would take off from that point. And that's why we often counsel good leaders to focus on succession from day one. Succession, prepares you for the fact that, as I said recently, that leaders are appointed or elected for a season. Leadership is not an all-season responsibility. So you need to prepare for that time, because the time will come when you have to yield the seat to somebody else. Now, the value, the contribution...
Before interjecting, Dr. Oshobodu, we're in a democracy. I know it's a little complex, but hey, we're in a democracy. The fellow can only be employed by the people through elections once every 4 years at the executive level. Now, in terms of succession, you are spot on, but please help me understand how we can systemize succession in a democracy of about how many parties that we have now? Quite a number of political parties, almost 20, if memory serves me right. So help me understand that for those who are wondering, what's Dr. Oshobodu talking about?
Now, let's use Lagos as an example. Now, many people may debate it, but Lagos is what it is today. Lagos is what it has been over the last, 24 years, because of precisely the concept of succession. Lagos had the opportunity of having the current president for a period of 8 years. The current president, I believe one of the things that distinguishes him and that points to the fact that he has something to offer as a credible leader is that he had developed people who were able to put themselves forward, to be trusted by the people, to succeed him. So succession is possible within the context of democracy, because if you're a good leader, people want your legacy to continue. And so when you have people that you have trained who have become part of, getting the job done while you were there, and they acknowledge, the quality of what you have done, those people will be favored at the polls. That's how, for the most part, it has been. People can talk about it, but look, the person who is the governor, Sanwo-Olu today, has been in the government since the days of Asiwaju. He has held positions there. He had held positions subsequently. The same thing. You can list them. It's one of the things I believe that made him different from others. You saw people who had been trained, who had been developed by him, who had been given leadership responsibilities, who approved their mettle, the likes of, Beraji Fashola. Now, so it is possible within the context of the democracy. In fact, what have we learned also? Many of the initiatives that he implemented in Lagos and that have been sustained over time and built upon by those who have succeeded him, in quotes, they have been embraced and adopted in other states. That's an indication of the kind of influence that good leadership can have. Now, what it means, therefore, within the context of a democracy is that if your party is such that offers that quality of leadership, all the other parties have to wake up if they want any chance of getting there. So they also have to come up with people, who they can offer as credible alternatives. And that means those people must have the kind of resume that compares effectively with the ones who have been ruling. So there is a sense in which if we are all focused on what good leadership really means, democracy itself helps us to upgrade the quality of our leadership. So I hope that addresses the point. If you look at the fact that, yes, we go to vote. Yeah, we go to vote, but we don't go to vote blindly. We go to vote, with something that we have an expectation and we have observed. So if we have people or a party who have been there, we're looking at what has the party done, we're looking at what has the individual done, and we're going, to the polls with that. And we're doing that in relation to the options that others are bringing forward. So we really, if we get the issues of leadership right from this perspective, democracy will help us to even further build the quality of leadership that we have in place. And so where we are starting today, the challenge before the president is on beginning to look at issues of succession, beginning to identify people, beginning to focus on leadership development, because what if all you want to do is to say, okay, I'm offering myself that's why I stepped forward. I know I can provide good leadership, but let's be clear that what good leadership is to do the same kind of thing that you did in Lagos, where you focused on developing leaders who will outlast you. The success of a leader, unfortunately, is not measured while the leader is in the position. It's measured after the leader has left. It's a lot less about what the leader does while he's there. It's much more about what happens after you have left. And I hope that is the kind of thinking that is running in the mind of the president. And one has reason to trust him that he knows what he's talking about if we use a Lagos as an example.
Professor, the president has acknowledged that we are only poor in management and leadership. So he has made that confession, and that gives the impression that, well, it doesn't give the impression because he acknowledges it, and that is why I ran for president, which means he is going to do something about it. What kinds of things are you expecting him to do to correct this?
Thank you so much, Alero. That's a very big responsibility His Excellency has taken on. Let me give you an example recently, and I'm sure many of us saw that. The recent meeting of Nigerian Bar Association, the treasurer of the organization stood up and said, I'm being given a statement to read and to sign that I'm not part of. That's the level of corruption we have seen in the nation. The elites of Nigeria, and I'm not saying all of them, but somehow there's something that's happening to the elites of Nigeria. We no longer have a sense of moral responsibility. So if the president is going to be effective, the first thing that must happen is we must address the issue of corruption. And he has to do it by starting at the top. The Prime Minister of Singapore had a zero corruption policy in Singapore. To demonstrate it, he persecuted the top ministers in his administration. By the time he sent one or two of them to prison, everybody else below knew that this prime minister is serious. People will be looking to see how his excellency addresses the issue of corruption in the top leadership of his government. If they see that, then they will know that indeed he has come to address. Why? Because if you don't address corruption at the top, then it gives all the people below them the license and the freedom to also practice the same. So that will be my first expectation, and that will create the right environment to now attract even foreign direct investment. They will know that Nigeria is ready to move forward. That will be my first comment, Alero.
Thank you, Dr. Shobodu. One of the things I personally have contended with over the years, especially in my practice, is the paucity of communication, or should I say effective communication, between the governed and the government. A good number of times, of course, we have Ministry of Information most of the time, especially at the federal and state levels. But giving information is essentially just putting it out there for the people to do with as they wish. But communication is a different ball game. Communication is a very complex process. And if you would recall, Peter Drucker said that one of the most important things in communication is to hear what isn't being said. Now, in terms of communication for leaders or leadership, what do we need to get right? A good number of times people have their heads in a particular direction as far as anything government is involved or is concerned. Anything that comes from government or with the appendage of government is taken in a particular context. And without the people...
With suspicion.
Exactly. And without the people, there can really be no government, so to speak, because, hey, and then there can be no leadership, because you can't lead yourself. If you can't lead people if you can't lead yourself. And if you are leading without having the following, you're just taking a walk. So what do we need to get right in terms of engaging the people for effective communication that produces the kind of feedback that government intended? Let's begin to close with that, Dr. Shobodu.
Okay, well, yes, I mean, the people need a leader, because the leader is as important to the people as the people are as important to the leader. The truth, however, is that it's not quite a two-way thing in terms of benefit, because whether we like it or not, the people stand to benefit from the leader, because the progress of the people is hinged on the leader. That's why we're talking about leadership at this point. But one of the greatest challenges of leaders is to secure the faith of the people, the trust and respect. Now, those three come together. No leader who understands leadership will take those for granted. That's the first thing that you need to earn. And it makes the president's offer to lead even more challenging because of the current environment. He needs to secure the trust, the faith of the people in his leadership. Without that backend, quite frankly, a leader is limited. Until the people believe in you, you really can't make much of an impact. Now, the issue of communication is crucial, because if people must believe in you, it starts first with what we have talked about. What is in it for the people? You have to communicate and keep communicating, and communicate indeed, not just putting words out or statements out. That means ensuring that the people understand, and that takes a lot of repetition. A lot of repetition. You must keep speaking about what plans you have, how it's going to benefit them in the language that they can understand. That's the first thing. I mean, people can talk about, well, people need to walk their talk. That's the next thing. Before you walk, there must be talk first. Otherwise, there's no talk to walk. You must talk first. There is no alternative to a leader. A leader who does not speak, a quiet leader, is a weak leader, can't achieve much. So leaders must place a lot of emphasis on communication. It wasn't there in the last regime. I'm hoping that it's going to be better this time around. Communication is key. The second thing is now that you must walk that talk. All right? People will hear you. And it's good to set that expectation. And it's good to set that expectation so that when you begin to deliver, they can appreciate that you are delivering. And so the next thing, once you have communicated, is that you need to deliver. You need to walk that talk. All right? And the moment as you begin to walk the talk, yes, more people begin to trust you. More people begin to believe in you. And when they believe in you, the importance of that for a leader is they then line up behind you. You can then count on them to cooperate with you to get the job done. That's the dynamic of leadership. That's how you need to win the hearts of the people so that they can strongly commit to you. Because the reason that there is a leader is because he can't do the job by himself. He needs people to help him. So having people who are following you is not for fun. Is that they need to cooperate with you. They need to support you in order to get the job done. Okay?
So, Prof. Pardon me, Dr. Shobodu. Same question, Prof., but from the perspective of transformation, of national transformation. I think about a week or two ago, we were talking about national orientation, and we were talking about the need for government not just to initiate it, but to also sustain it. So in terms of communicating with government in a sustainable manner, we have tried it before. And a good number of times people are asking, where is the National Orientation Agency in this? Interestingly now, the federal government has renamed the Federal Ministry of Information as the Federal Ministry of Information and National Orientation. In terms of leadership, what is it that we should be hearing from the government through the Federal Ministry of Information and National Orientation for the people to take ownership of the nation, not just the initiative of the president or the federal government, but of the nation, and take it with themselves everywhere they go?
Thank you so much, Ayo. One of the things that's lacking in our media, beyond the propaganda we see every time, is that people don't understand the cost of their behavior to the society. They don't really understand the little things they do every day, how cumulatively it affects the nation. That's the job of the National Orientation Agency, to teach us, to help us to understand. I tried in the past to work with that organization since I moved back to Nigeria. And I must admit that I have not been very successful. If you monitor what happened in Singapore, I always refer to Singapore because it's a model that has worked. They were where we were in the past, and they have moved on to develop a poor community, a viable nation. So what did they do? They used every available platform to teach the people, not just radio and television, but even social organizations. For example, everywhere that people gather, be it age grade, be it church groups, be it whatever, everywhere people gather, they find a way to penetrate that platform and he used it to teach and train the people. It was a massive effort. For example, Ayo, can you believe that when high rises were built in Singapore, that people were still taking their goods and their pets to the high urinating in the elevators? But it took consistent orientation programs through cultural organizations to finally change those habits. So the National Orientation Agency should engage all the platforms where people gather. They should develop a program to train our people how or what it takes to run effective society, their civic responsibilities, and then work with community leaders at various levels across the nation to implement this program. Of course, it's going to cost money, but the benefit would be a system would have been changed, and of course, leading to not just social welfare, but even economic development. That we have not taken.
Cost us more than money, it'll cost us a lot more time. Which leads to this last one, Prof. Someone sent us a mail. Akabom Enebong says, you need to focus more on the challenge of corruption if we have to make any progress. We've talked about that not once, not twice in our national life, be it at the federal or state level. How significant is that conversation around corruption in this whole conversation around leadership that matters, be it federal or state level?
Very significant. In fact, it is the number one. And the reason that corruption has fostered in Nigeria is because the culprits are not caught and punished, to punish people who systematically and consistently engage in corrupt practices. People will sit up, but they see, and I'm sorry to say, they see people who are guilty, or at least have been accused of such practices, around free. That sends a message to the younger generation that you can do anything literally and go with it. And that's why I go back and say, one thing that this government must do, if indeed, given that corruption is among the 8-point agenda that they want to address, they must show examples by, again, fairly not only addressing that issue, but actually sentencing to prison people on top who have engaged in such practices. That will send a strong across the nation. And
we have also seen, Prof, without meaning to extend the conversation any longer, we have also seen situations where people who are caught or, indicted for corruption have gone to jail and left jail and be given presidential pardon. So it goes back to the issue of signals that you're speaking about. Well, it's another conversation starter we've had here, gentlemen. Thank you so much for your time. Professor Vincent Anebogu is Director General, International Institute for National Transformation. He joined us along with Dr. Olatunji Shobodu, who is founder and CEO, Emet Leadership Academy. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time this morning, and all the best.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
All right. We're back right after now to talk about how do we lead teenagers. Okay, no, that's not the word. Let's first of all understand that teenager before we can lead them. That's up on Lifestyle when we return.
Thank you for staying with us. Peer pressure, a universal phenomenon experienced by teenagers across the globe, plays a considerable role during their formative years. As adolescents strive to carve out their unique identities and personalities, these external influences can deeply impact their mental health, choices, and overall well-being.
Sometimes if they don't develop it well, they become peer-pressured parents.
But let's start with, what is the meaning of peer pressure? Kingsley Obom Igbulem, the founder of Talent Hub, works with young people. You may remember him from the last time he was with us, also talking about young people and their potential. Good morning, Kingsley.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming.
Well, I know you will permit me to say thank you so much, Alero, but after the studio is Auntie Alero.
Whichever works with you.
No, he has bought the broadcaster's bug. He also happens to have a radio program or two.
I know. So what is peer pressure?
It's simple, peer pressure. Peer means your mate. Pressure is to be pressed.
Like the pressure cooker.
Simple. Imagine carrying a load, and the load is 10 times
heavier than you.
That's it. That's simple. It's as graphic as that. However, if you push it further, it's like being compelled to do things you ordinarily would not do on a normal day. Your mates, your peers, influencing your lifestyle.
Okay.
Based on one, the prevailing culture, trends, and two, the values that shaped you up until that time.
Okay. Some teens, some children, because they're still children really, succumb to this pressure.
Yeah.
And some do not.
Yep.
Some resist as much as they can. How does a young person deal with peer pressure? Because whether they like it or not, the pressure is going to be there.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I think to a large extent, one factor that comes to play in how you manage to navigate through peer pressure is the values on which you were raised as a child. And these values stem from the family we come from. And to a large extent, well, you may excuse me, but that's the reality. The faith you subscribe to. Faith. Yeah, there's a role of spirituality in all of this. But I don't want to just dwell, I won't dwell much on that, but I'm going to dwell on values. Value is everything. You know, I was speaking somewhere and they were saying social media, sorry, this is just a slight digression. They said social media is changing our youth, is influencing the way our youth behave. I said, no, it is not social media. What social media is doing is unveiling what has been. what social media is doing is helping us see clearly what has been. And what is it? What has been? What has been is that over time, we're gradually losing the values on which we're raised, where there's been an erosion of values. And so what social media has done is to help us see clearly what this erosion has done to us.
And
For instance,
how big the problem has been.
Exactly, the magnitude of the problem. For instance, let's assume hypothetically, AY has a young kid on his street that says, now that kid can't look at him and use certain words. Now, AY is on Facebook and he just posted something. Up Chelsea. And this kid is a Man U fan, just a useless man. Because they are social media. But this boy is actually showing who he really is.
He really is. Mm.
So that's what, so I'm going back to values now. Kids who are raised on strong values, when they confront peer pressure or when they are confronted with the reality of being influenced by their peers, they respond with the values.
But Kingsley, you will also admit that the issue of values has become bigger than ever before.
Yeah.
Because once upon a time, more mothers stayed at home to bring up their children.
Agree.
But because of the circumstances of our lives today, more mothers have to go out to work, not because they want to, they have to augment what comes home to actually bring up these children, put food in their mouths.
Yeah.
So the issue of values, is it not being eroded right from where it's supposed to be coming?
No, what I think is what you painted is an economic picture. That picture is also a test of whether or not we have this value. You know, values not tested, they're actually not values. Until your values are tested, that's when you know that you actually were raised on these values. For instance, you bought a laptop, and the laptop is beautifully packed. My brother, you will not say you have a laptop until
you open it.
You open it, plugged it, and somebody says, "Ayo, please send me," and the laptop is responding. And then there's a power surge, and the laptop is still standing. Say, Omo, this laptop is
correct.
Only when
it's
it is
been
tested.
So when your child, you raise the child, and the child has been in your house 365 days, and now he's 12. Go to town. Let's know how far. So the realities, the dynamics of society, the everyday issues actually put to test the values that we've been raised on. So whether you're working or not, whether you're making ends meet or not, it is not an excuse. You can still raise these kids based on strong values, knowing that one day they're going to be tested. And if you know, once in a while, expose them to these tests and see how well you're doing.
You know, what you have raised now just raises an issue of like a building a house. No matter what promises that house makes, until you put load on it, you don't know how strong the foundation is.
At all.
So you don't know whether the foundation, whether the house is going to collapse or destroy. Or demolish, because they're two different.
Exactly.
You know, they are two different things. But you know, where I'm going really is this. Because I experienced this in a very touching way. What would happen, for instance, in a public school? If it happened in a private school, it would be different, sort of. Yeah. Here is where I'm going. So once, I made my children go to public school. And I, of course, did some search, and I found out, okay, these schools in Lagos, they had certain parameters. I took them to school with the vehicle every day.
Okay.
So one day, my daughter came and said, "Daddy, don't come and pick me or drop me with the car anymore." said, why? He said, no, we will walk.
Okay.
Incidentally, anyway, long and short, later I now asked her, so why did you say I should stop coming to pick you with the car? Said they used to call her Omo Get Inside.
Okay.
Omo Get Inside.
Yeah.
So I said,
as in she's housebound. She's locked in the house, and she doesn't go out.
Said the people who called you Omo Get Inside.
But they wouldn't mind cars fetching them from
Exactly.
Yeah.
I said the people who called you this, they didn't have what you have.
Yeah. That's a form of peer pressure.
So I now said, but you know that if these same persons were in private school and you went to school on foot,
I mean, the story will be different.
So that speaks to what in particular?
In fact,
it's how do I put it now? It's more of a culture. It's within that climb. That's the prevailing culture, and then you also find out that from the point of view of peer pressure, there's always the tendency for young people, not just young people, for anybody who is a trendsetter to set the direction that the community, the tribe follows. That's the word, the tribe. Your child is in a new climb, so to speak. And in this climb, this is what is prevailing. So you are an exception. But you see, if you as a parent, if you are privy to this prevailing culture, you can insulate your kids. Yeah. And then you can also look at it from the point of view, okay, what are they going to gain here? Street sense is a life skill. Being street smart is a life skill. So what you've done for your children could also, I mean, it has its own flip side. You may send them there to say, okay, you see what I'm sending you guys here? Is to be street smart. Because even if you go to Harvard and come back, there's a child who will collect your money from you.
Well, you know, the reason I'm asking that question, I want to say something the other time.
Yes, I wanted to corroborate your story.
Okay.
Because I have a family friend who owns a Honda and a Benz. They put their child in one of these highbrow schools in Ikeja. So they went to school to go pick her in the Honda. Daddy, please don't bring the Honda to pick me again.
Of course, I was going to say that. Yeah.
Which one you buy?
What car are you bringing?
Yes. They will ask you.
If you're bringing
holiday time, you're coming to collect me from the boarding house.
Yes.
Daddy, what car are you bringing?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's so many issues to raise here, but there is something you don't want to go into, and I think we need to go into it, and here is why. You see, values are not values because you see them on the face. You live them out.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, one of the ways in which parents, I think, try to instill values in their children is through going to one religious environment or the other. There is also the place of community. The Yorubas say
socialization.
Is one parent, a set of parents that give birth to a child. It's the community that raises the child.
Yeah.
In those days.
In those days.
Not anymore.
Yes, because I remember. I remember
in my negative side.
In my hometown, and I've said this quite a few times. At the center of town, there's a sign. Remember the son of whom you are.
Yeah.
It's a community. It's the entire locality. It's not a Christian environment or a Muslim environment, but that sign is there.
Yeah.
Remember the son of whom you are. And there are traditionalists there. But that's a sign in the middle of the town. Remember the son of whom you are. And one of the ways in which people try to instill these values that they will take all over the world is through one religious environment or the other.
Yep.
Now, parents do that because they expect that maybe if I'm able to put these children into this particular space of life, they will turn out in a particular direction.
Yeah.
They will be good children, they will be truthful, they will be honest, and all those things.
And never mind that when they turn 30, they turn around and look at you, I don't believe in God.
Imagine that. So what causes that? I mean, you have done everything you're supposed to do as a parent, and the child is still the way the child is.
Well, okay. Do we have time? The first is, maybe I should start from the, let's use the funnel approach. So let's start from the base now. Hypocrisy is a crime in parenting. If you must commit any crime as a parent, please avoid hypocrisy. If children cannot match your words and your action, you've already started failing. And most of the vices you see around, most of the revolts you see around, the countercultures that seem to question the values on which we're raised, is because of hypocrisy. For instance,
Hypocrisy of the parents.
yes, and then extended to so-called leaders and elders of society.
Just to be clear, ma'am,
Yes.
I'm sorry, Kingsley, just to be clear, when you say hypocrisy of parents, what are you talking about? Please be blunt.
Yes.
They are the ones listening to you. Because you know, as I do that.
I can't say this without being, I can't be hypothetical now. I have to be concrete. I have to give you examples, right? A governor who was barely making a living, a man who was barely making a living. His kids were attending, you know, not so highbrow private school. We all saw him. He became a member of a political party. He was elected a commissioner. 4 years, the wife has 3 private schools, owns 3 private schools. The children are now abroad. My brother, how do you want to explain that to a young child, a teenager, who is watching that man did not steal the money? You cannot defend that. So if you come up to that child and you're preaching morality, he will just be looking at you.
And you are done.
You try.
Uncle, when are you going to be done?
Oh, God.
Finish this thing, let's move on. The guy has made up his mind. Stealing is a state policy. When it gets to my turn, I will do the same. My teeth. That's 1. 2, a 16-year-old has just gained admission into University of Lagos. First semester, a lecturer approaches her. Nkiru, Aderonke, you have failed this course. And this is just first semester. If you are not ready to spend 8 years in this school, you need to do something urgently. So what should I do now? Go and ask your colleagues. That is my father's mate trying to sleep with me. And you want to come and preach to me that there's no problem, and you want me to subscribe to whatever it is you're preaching about morality. That's not going to happen. If I sleep my way through school, I'm going to continue, and I'm going to see everybody, my bosses, law enforcement, anybody. Jesus. I'm going to see them from that light. I'm in the, I go to the police station. I'm seeing a guy that is old enough to be my father, literally collecting money from a criminal and letting the guy go free. And then tomorrow you come and tell me, then this is the worst. Let me give you this one. This one is the real, the organic of them all. So you're telling me, Amaka, read your book. Amaka, read your book. Amaka, read your book. And I'm reading. It's time to write JAM, UTME, and WAEC. The next thing, I see parents sorting WAEC officials. I'm saying, Beju, who could not write an essay. I know her very well. and she has straight A's, okay? And you're telling me to read? No, I'm not going to read, man. I'm going to toe that line because society celebrates it. And then the last but not least, you're telling me, don't have sex before marriage. Don't sleep around. Okay. And the next Saturday, we're at a wedding. My cousin, she's 8 months pregnant at a wedding ceremony. You, my mother, we're all there. And you are dancing and praying. Hey. And I'm like, come on. This girl is pregnant. We can all see it. And it's her wedding day. She's just 26. So what happened? Is she a Virgin Mary? Okay, so I'm going to be confused as a young person. What is happening in this society?
So those things, you're saying those things form the pressure?
That's what is breeding what we're seeing now. And at some point, it is no longer pressure. It is now a decision. Based on what? Based on my perception of what society is. Because there's a lot of contradiction as regards to what we call morality, what we call values, what we call principles.
So where does drug use among young people come in?
Hey.
The reason I'm asking...
No, okay, we don't have the whole day.
Okay.
Actually, we have only 4 minutes.
The drug thing, I told you last time. You see, these days, the feelers we're getting is that before, guys who stray into drug use, guys who take drugs, those days used to be the bad boys, isn't
so
it?
I'm just being correct. Is it drug use or substance use?
Okay, drug use and substance abuse. Okay. Drug and substance, they're the same. You have drugs and you have substance. Okay. They both have the same end. This child wants to feel good, high, and wants to cope.
Why?
Cope with what? Cope with pressure.
The problems that the 14-year-old has.
They're coping with...
I'm going through a lot. Remember that?
Yeah.
Oh, so it's the lot that they want to cope
with? Yeah, that they want to cope with.
For instance,
yes.
I'll give you this. Medicine as a course is a difficult course to study. Some kids get into class, they're not sure what they sign up for. Engineering maths is a big deal. To cope through it is not beans. Now you get into school, and man, this thing is hitting you left, right, and then you can't sleep. You're reading, and one boy said, what thing they happen? I said, this thing they scatter my head. They say, take this thing.
Bust my brain.
Just
take this thing.
Take a step down.
Yes.
You took it, and man.
Initially you said
no. You feel good.
No! We said no. A guy is lost in his mind. I told you last time, my daughter is writing SATs. And for the first time, she's seen maths that she's never seen before. She called up and said, Daddy, my head is heavy. We had to show up in school. Now, if she's not used to calling me when she has a problem, what will she do? She will sort herself.
Call her friend.
Most times,
call her
friend.
Yeah.
And if her friend has gone through that phase and she navigated through drugs,
or substances.
Or substance abuse.
Yeah.
She was just recommending, take this one. When you take this you'll be fine. Put it in noodles, eat it, and you sleep nice. And you take it the first day, and you slept well. Boy, that becomes a way of life.
Quickly, Kingsley, how does one form a support network for something like this to help a teenager that you notice is under such pressure?
We need to revive guidance and counseling in public schools. I use the word revive because it's dead. So if anybody's listening now and you have influence in public education, that is like a silver bullet. If we can revive the role and the place of guidance and counseling, and then equip these guidance and counselors, equip them solidly, consistently, training and retraining, so that at least in school youths, I'm using the word in school youths, we can have access to them before they go astray. They know where to go to. In a non-judgmental, empathetic, and, professional way. A child is going through anything, you know that I have a guidance and counselor in school that I can run to. That's a solution. Then you have the next tier. What is that? There's career counseling, which the guidance and counselors can also be equipped to do. Now, some children, they drop off when they can no longer cope with academic rigor. So when you have a trained career advisor or counselor who can help you tie your talent, your strength to the subjects you should be doing. That way you just, glide through school.
This challenge, is it something peculiar to boarding school or day students?
No, it's a general thing. And it's not a class, anybody, both the high, the middle class, everybody is going through it. Because school is a microcosm of the society, the average child could easily be tracked while in school. But you see, because the net in our schools, the safety nets, the psychosocial net we have in our schools are so tiny, the threads are thin, that it can't carry these kids. You have a teacher who hasn't even mastered his own life or her own life. How do you attend to a child who is going through, first of all, the child is from an abusive home, a dysfunctional home. Now the child is struggling with academics, and then drugs, sex, everything, and you as a teacher, you don't even know your left from your right. How do you attend to that child?
Indeed, they go through a lot.
Yeah. It's a lot,
Indeed.
really. Quickly, yes. So some parents are watching right now.
And then there is the faith side.
Okay.
The mosque, the church, and with all due respect, the traditional, on a lighter note. So if we have that structure, we can, some churches already have counseling department. So what do? Rejig that department in a way that they can be youth-friendly. Young people don't ordinarily go to counseling, because they see all of us adults as hypocritical.
Not an easy thing. Leading to this question.
Why should I come to you when you are just like my father who is abusing me at home?
Oh my God. Leading to this question. So what do the parents watching you right now, where do they begin this conversation with their kids? Where do they...
Okay.
There's that distance.
Yes.
There's that distance, that discordance, that dissociation, so to speak. You have
between parent and child.
For a parent listening now, a starting point is do what I called personal parenting audit, PPA. Call your children and sit them down. Say, how have I fared as a parent?
Will they tell the truth?
If you're ready to hear the truth, the children will tell you. What am I doing wrong?
But how do they know? Because they've never had a parent before until you became their parent.
Yeah, I'm saying, he said, those watching now.
Yeah.
If you are sincere and you want to redeem the time, you want to move forward, indeed, sit your child down and say, I'm your father. In what way have I messed up? That's the starting point. Let's start from home. How can I improve as a parent?
Our time is up.
You have not given me enough pocket money.
No problem. Take all the notes. Take all the notes and then start to address them one by one. Because you see, when you know your problem, you can start to solve them.
I joke with my kids as we round off. I joke with my kids. The only proof you have that I'm your parent is a piece of paper. I say, Daddy, what are you talking about? I say,
Kingsley Obom Egbulem, founder of the Talent Hub, and a person who deals with young people, as in teenagers. Thank you very much for coming to us this morning.
The matter is a long matter.
We've only just started, so we need to bring you back to continue this discussion because it's very, very important. Because a lot of teenagers are struggling at home,
and a lot of
parents are struggling to cope with their teenagers. So we need to talk about this more, so that even parents can become better parents to these children who complain that their parents never know the lots that they're going through.
Angry teenagers out there.
Angry Nigerian youths. Oh, sorry. Okay.
Sunrise will be right back with the home stretch in just a moment. Do stay with us.
Where you from, what you do, just as long as you're chasing money, do what's right, never give up.
That's our home stretch, the artist of the week. The other time, Alera and I was saying...
No, that's not him.
I know.
That was P-Square.
Yeah, so we're talking about the artist, no, artist of the week.
Oh, artist. Okay, all right.
Okay, let me see how. Let me try to say it the way Mr. Kruzich will say it.
Don't put your foot in it.
This collaborative international exchange program engages. No, it's not working. So we have quite a pack in the house this morning. This collaborative international exchange program engages underserved communities in 6 countries around the world and uses artistic collaboration and social engagement to enhance people-to-people diplomacy. You probably haven't heard that before, especially among young audiences. Using multidisciplinary hip-hop collaborations, this unique arts-based exchange explores and addresses conflict resolution strategies by sending up to 20 American beat makers. Beat makers, not just musicians. Just slow down. DJs, B-boys and B-girls, or experts of other types of hip-hop dance, or MCs in teams of 5 artists to lead 4 to 6 week exchange programs in various countries. What all of this is about, you're about to hear from 3 gentlemen joining us this morning. Joe Kruzich is U.S. Consulate's Public Affairs Officer. Thanks for joining us this morning. Thank you. Genius Brickhouse is here. He's Director of Next Level. Thank you. As well as Rizki Rahmat. He's Site Manager. Thank you for being here this morning. Okay, so I've been saying all of those. Help me understand what we're dealing with here, Mr. Kruzich.
Well, we're very proud at the U.S. Consulate in Lagos to be able to bring together great artists from the United States and Nigeria. And we do that in a number of different fields. And in this case, it has to do with hip-hop music and Afrobeats music, which is very popular in the U.S. and also very popular here in Nigeria.
I know hip-hop is popular there.
We're also doing a lot in the film sector as well, creating exchanges between Hollywood and Nollywood. That's one of our priority areas for our diplomatic engagement with Nigeria, with the Nigerian people and its government. And so we're just very excited to be able to welcome all of these great American artists as part of a program that we have through the U.S. State Department for 2 weeks here through the good offices of Ogidi Studios, one of Africa's leading recording studios, a studio that was vital for the production of the soundtrack of Wakanda Forever, so that they're now engaging with a number of talented young musicians in Lagos and across Nigeria.
Interesting. Mr. Brickhouse.
Blessings.
Next Level. It's not a new phrase. What's this about? You're the director of Next Level.
Yes, so Next Level, the term itself is one that annotates growth, that says we are evolving, we are growing, we are always trying to do better. So the program in itself is an initiative sponsored by the Bureau of Education and Cultural Affairs of the U.S. Department of State, administered by Meridian International Center in Washington, D.C., and also partnered with the U.S. Consulate here in Lagos, and as Joe mentioned, Ogidi Studios. Our goal is to engage communities and to build connected communities like across the globe through the lens of hip-hop culture.
So when he talked about Afrobeat being popular in the U.S., what's he talking about?
Well, Afrobeat is
ours, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm proud to say that. You know?
Yeah, no, absolutely. and actually you should be. And that's why these types of exchanges are important, because hip-hop is an American-derived art form. However, it is considered very international, mostly because people were able to find it in their own languages, and they're able to express themselves in the languages that they speak, and also in the movement that makes sense to them. So what that looks like and how we connect as a program is what Next Level aims to do.
You know, Mr. Rahmat, one of the things a host of people will, once they hear American music, it comes with a mindset. Now, integrating that into the cultures of other countries, how easy or not is it, in your opinion? How is the acceptance?
I think it's a two-way street. as our artist educators and our team comes to these countries like Lagos, we really approach it with a reciprocating kind of exchange mentality. So part of it, for us is sharing who we are as individuals, where we come from, what our art forms is, but a lot of it too is learning who all is participating here and what that looks and feels like. So is it easy? It's as easy as you and I, exchanging jokes or enjoying music and sitting and exchanging. So as easy as we make it. But when it's conflict, we also do conflict transformation workshops where we talk about, are we having a conversation? Are we having a dialogue? Or are we debating? And through that, we can find different ways where we can connect, find similarities, and hopefully accept our differences. But it's always a case-by-case basis.
How accepted has Afrobeats been in the United States?
Oh, I think it's very, very well accepted, and it's had a great influence on American cultural development overall. I would just add, for example, we were very much a supporter of the Headies, which is the Grammys of Nigeria. The Headies just finished up this last weekend, the second time in a row that they held the Headies in Atlanta, Georgia. So that shows you right there the prominence of Afrobeats music in the United States, that one of Africa's premier music awards would be held in Atlanta, Georgia, which is also a center of Afrobeat innovation and hip-hop music, and also the film is called Hollywood West now because of the film industry and Tyler Perry and what he's done to bring studios over there. So it's a great influence that it's had on America, and we like to see this as a collaboration. There's also obviously influences from American music on Nigeria, and out of that we create something even better. And I think this collaboration that we're seeing in the music realm, and also in the collaboration between Nollywood and Hollywood, and Afrif coming up in November. We're going to have lots of American studios here, Netflix, Amazon. We're going to have a group called Global Media Makers from Los Angeles coming out here to spot talent in the Nigerian place. We have right now 3 or 4 filmmakers from Nollywood doing some major training for 2 months in Los Angeles that we're funding out of the U.S. consulate. So there's just a whole bunch of activity going on between the U.S. and Nigeria in the creative industry space. And we think this has lots of potential for creating stronger relations between the peoples of the United States and Nigeria.
Julius, Joe did say earlier that you were working across Nigeria. So apart from Lagos, where else would you be visiting?
Well, this particular residency, we'll be at Ogidi Studios, like in Lagos. However, people are coming from different places across Nigeria. Previously, Next Level has been to a total of 52 different countries that we've had. This is our 52nd residency in the last 10 years. So about 5 years ago, we were in Abuja for a program as well, where we worked with artists across 4 different geopolitical regions to come together and work on community building and entrepreneurship.
What was that experience like for you, listening to music that you probably never heard before?
Actually, I'm pretty much a fan, so I've heard it before, but I think we're a lot more connected through music than people assume. There are oceans between us, but make no mistake about it, people get music. And for me, the experience was an amazing one, mostly because of the people that we were able to connect with across languages and across understandings. I'm about that, right? And I think that's a good start, for us to ask questions beyond the music. How are people living their lives? What makes them tick? Mostly, what do we not know about you? So, frankly, the music, the art, is just exactly, and that's why we're here. It's not what makes us the same; it's what we don't know about each other.
Risky, how long have you been in Nigeria?
I've been in Nigeria about 7 days now. It's been 1 week.
Okay.
Where,
and you've been in Lagos 7 days?
We have been in Lagos, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Where have you visited in Lagos?
Well, we've spent the majority of the time at Ogidi Studios. However, we also went to the Ogobidi House, which had an open mic night on Thursday night, which is very fun. It's kind of first time artists coming on the mic, doing their thing, and veteran also musicians playing live. So that was a very enjoyable scene. We're going to be visiting various cultural visits as well. We're hoping to do the canopy walk, the hike. And we're meeting a lot of local dancers and artists and musicians, so we get to hang out with them both at the studio, but hoping to see a little bit more on the ground stuff. But we've been pretty busy preparing our performance.
Which musicians have you met?
Well, I'm sorry?
Which of the Nigerian musicians have you met?
They're all local, I would say, starting artists. So I'm not sure if they're. We work with those folks who are hungry for growth and wanting to exchange with us. So a lot of the big timers are, probably a little bit outside of our purview, but
they're already big, so they don't need.
Well, we're very open to working with them, but yeah, exactly. In
the past, the program, Next Level program, has worked with M.I. Abaga before.
So one of the, for me, one of the smoothest rappers.
Yes, pretty smooth.
One of the smoothest for me. Okay, well, she was asking where have you been? I'm not going to lead you on. What food have you tried?
Exactly.
I want to ask you because you're already a Lagosian.
You live here, don't you?
So me. Okay.
Yes, you.
I've had the goat curry. I had some jollof rice as well, and I've had some yam porridge. Different combinations of yam and plantains. Those were really great for me.
You? No, I know you. I was. Why am I even asking? He's already a Lagosian. Okay, so we're just waiting for you to get set now, and then we begin to get some music. Now, what are some of the not pushback, but learning points? Learning points that you think we need to give attention to. What are the learning points for you that you think could help this collaboration a lot more? A good number of people want to just, let me use the local parlance, jackpot. You know what that means? Don't worry, Google it, you'll find out.
But you need to tell him so he can answer your question.
I can tell him.
He'll tell him.
Oh, he's a Nigerian, so he knows.
So many people just want to, leave. For you, what are the things that you think, the values that you think, if people gave it more attention from your experience, having traveled all over the place, maybe perhaps certain common trends or threats you've seen in the attitudes of especially young people, that if they gave it more attention, maybe they would cherish a lot more of the things that they have?
I think the key point, especially when you're talking about entrepreneurship or professional development, is understanding who you are and where you're from. Without that understanding, it doesn't translate well to international communities, right? And most of all, you don't want to test things on other communities. It has to be authentic. It has to be solid. And that means as you're dreaming about where you can go with their art, think about what it means to you at home. As a person who works with artists that I meet often for the first time, my first question's about what are you bringing to the table? Who are you when the music is off? And I think that's something that we try to teach artists to embrace, is that they come from something special. For them, they need to identify what that is and translate that to people.
Any culture shock for you, Risky?
Culture shock? No. So I am an American.
Well, of course, after going to 50 whatever cities, no culture shock, but go ahead.
I am an American, but my family is from Indonesia, and there are actually very common similarities in the way we dress and some of the food, and it's equatorially very similar in where we are. So it's actually, I'm relating to a lot of Nigerian things. Vibes. Yes, thank you for the word.
Juniors, going back to the food, what food have you tasted here?
I eat everything. So, like,
it sounds like a missionary.
Yeah, I know. Look, I know that sounds bad, but I don't play with food.
Oh.
So when people offer it, I eat it. And
what did you like best?
Actually, I'm a jollof person. So like across like all of the countries, I'm always trying jollof. Like, and I don't eat it like much at home because I savor it so much. But I prefer Nigerian jollof, just in case somebody was going to ask.
There you go again.
I know that was
that question answered.
I knew that was the next question.
But one of the, and I see that some of your colleagues right there, they're just laughing. I know we're going to get there, but music is such a powerful universal language. We are broadcasters, so we've done a lot of playing of music on radio over the years. A transition between people's interest in foreign music. Your music here is foreign, of course. Mine is foreign to you, but now it seems to be bringing everything together. To from the transition from foreign music to local music and then back to mixing everything is quite unique. But the angle that you are bringing this from is that of body beats, B-boys, B-girls, and the rest of them. Tell us about that. What are the elements to expect?
Yeah, so with hip-hop, we have multiple elements. We have the music makers, which are our DJs, our music producers, our beatboxers. We have our MCs. We have our aerosol artists, and we have our B-boys, B-girls, or dancers, as they're commonly referred to. We have our aerosol artists who also are able to tell our stories and put them up for us to see and give us the images. There's many other elements, but I think the main, what's at the foundation of this is expression. And how are we expressing ourselves? And what are the stories that we're telling about the places that we're from and the people who mean the most to us?
So, okay, let me turn to Joe now. This program has been going on for a while.
Yes.
How are Nigerians embracing this, and how are they reacting to it?
Oh, I think they're embracing it very warmly, and I mean, you can see by the enthusiasm over at Ogidi Studios when they're doing the jamming together and when they're doing making music together, just the excitement. And I would just say we did a dance troupe come through here in July. We did a dance concert over Eco Hotel, really well attended, 500 people. We did all these workshops with all dance studios across Lagos, and the same thing happened. They did workshops during the days before the performance at night, and you could see the enthusiasm in the young people, and their talent was just so strong and so emotional. And you see that in all of the different performing artists that we're doing, and then also in the film area too. When I see young filmmakers from America come over and do workshops and do exchanges with young Nollywood filmmakers, you see the same thing. So there's just this great enthusiasm in Nigeria and also in America for learning about Nigeria, and for Nigerians learning about what's going on in the U.S. as well. And so we're trying to bring the two together to produce some really great stuff. And I think in the future we're going to see great products and great collaboration in music and in film that'll be not just American or Nigerian, but Nigerian American or American Nigerian.
You're going to have to give us a new category of citizenship for that one. But
Junior, it looks like when it comes to music, Nigeria is down. Nigeria is ready. We're there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't think anybody thinks anything different. Like that is factual. And it's not just about their truth, it's how they're able to convey it. And
tell me, what in your opinion is most unique? We're going to take your group right now, but What, in your opinion, from your experience as a musician, is unique about Afrobeats that excites you?
You know, I think what excites me about Afrobeats is experimentation, like with rhythm. Not sticking to normal chords, using different types of percussion.
I thought that was upsetting.
What?
I thought that would be upsetting.
No, like that's the inspiration. Like the inspiration is to some of us who don't fancy being purists. We're looking to Nigeria for that inspiration. Like almost saying, who's not at the table? What music is not at the table? What rhythms are not being represented? Show that to us. And tell those stories in your language. It makes us ask questions about the languages that they're speaking as well.
Well, this is a long conversation because I'm wondering what Beethoven would have thought about what you just said. But my producer is trying to bring someone in now. Is she bringing the fellow in while we're waiting for that? I know that you have a number of other people joining us in the group.
Yes.
Tell us about them.
Yeah, so we have a team of 3 artist educators today coming on stage. Okay. Mel Beats from New York City. He is a beat maker. He's going to be playing some live beats.
Is that him?
And experimentation. Yes, instrumentation. Okay. And we also have Jay Swiss from New York City. He is an MC rapper who's going to be rapping over the beats, so you'll see a little bit of that collaboration. And we have the talented and incomparable Renee Ali, who is living from Baltimore, Maryland, but is from Flint, Michigan. She is a dancer of many sorts.
All right, let them come down. Come on, no. Okay, but you know he's got to start, right?
He's moving to the beat.
Well, I can hear. He can't hear himself.
Yeah.
So.
Yes, y'all, and you don't stop. Yes, y'all, and you don't stop.
So I only put love in the show. Avoid no enemy, it's all love in the flow. When I'm in it, becomes something that it wasn't before. Authentic before me, man, it wasn't as raw. We on the right track. You could be you, don't fight that. How you feel, do it just like that. If they leave, they gon' be right back. Look, be a B-girl or a mic star. Do a tap dance, make a dope beat. In the tell hood, tell them how far. Tell them that's good, tell them how far. This is next level with Rez, Benet, and Mel. Jay Switch raps with words I paint as well. So bow, let me know how the frames present me. If you're not authentic, then the game is risky. Come on, keep it authentic, y'all. Come on, keep it authentic, y'all. Come on, keep it authentic, y'all. Come on, keep it authentic. Get it, Benet. Yeah, keep it authentic. Next level, Renee Ali, Mel Beats, Jay Swiss. Shout out to Rez. Glad to be here. Lagos, from Baltimore to New York. to Miami,
Yes,
to
y'all.
DC, LA, much love.
I could go on and on, you know, but
Indeed.
yeah, because right now I want to try that.
I love to see.
Because you know, I'm gonna try it next year.
Whoa.
Because you know, there's this African music called bata. It's even though they don't wear shoes when they dance the beat, but hey, maybe you should try one of these. It's only that we have to just. But I gotta thank you guys for being here, man. That's amazing.
Well done.
Now, I know you're still. Don't worry, you're still starstruck right now.
Yes, exactly.
Her.
I mean,
I trained her. Everything that she's doing. Well, we'll come back to that one. I have to thank you very much, Joe Kruzich, for being here this morning.
Thank you. I just want to mention too that they'll be at the Freedom Park performing
today.
Not today.
September 15th.
September 15th.
All right, cool.
Okay.
So more of that information we're going to get from Tayo. Thank you so much for your time. He's U.S. Consular Public Affairs Officer. Junior's Brickhouse, Director of Next Level, was here as well as Risky Rakhmat, who is site manager. Thank you all for being here, and thank you, and thank you, and thank you.
And good luck at the show at Freedom Park.
Absolutely. Well, you can watch the replay. Well, it's going to be at Freedom Park, by the way, just so you know.
On the 15th of September.
Thank you so much. That's been Sunrise today. I'm Ayo Makinde. Have a wonderful rest of the weekend.
And I am Alero Edu, wishing you all the best. See you at Freedom Park on the 15th.
Well,
bye.
I'm going to try that, you know.
Good luck. Don't break your legs.